All right, welcome everybody. Just wanted to say thank you to everybody and welcome everybody into this. We'll be recording this and then sending that out. So those who show up late or those who can't make it will get the recording. So I wanted to introduce myself and then hand it over here. So my name is Judson Ungst and I'm the Regional Vice President for DreamBox. So I get the pleasure of working with school districts across the East Coast, from Maine down to Florida. And today we're going to be talking to the fine folks from Burke County Schools in North Carolina. So just where it is, it's in the mountain region, Central West. Beautiful country in the Appalachians. About 90,000 people live there. And Morganton is the kind of the county home there. So what I'm going to do is hand it off to Jennifer Hart. Jennifer has been working with all the folks from Burke County. She's been their liaison and been working on, what is it that they're looking to do and how are they implementing with Fidelity, especially during what has been an enormously challenging time for all of us this year. So again, thank you everybody for joining and really excited to have the people share their knowledge. So Jennifer, take it away.
Thank you so much. We're so excited you joined us today. I want to do a quick shout out to our North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Florida, Delaware, Connecticut, California, Arizona, Kansas, and Mississippi peeps. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you for taking time out of your day. We wanted to make sure that we weren't wasting your time because we know it's so valuable. So we really wanted to be targeted. You're not going to hear a lot about DreamBox today. We're going to unashamedly give a 2 to 3 minute commercial in the middle, but other than that, we really wanted you to benefit from hearing from a district who has implemented program during a pandemic really well. That implementation fidelity is so important, and it's really hard to get all stakeholders involved and really be successful. And Dr. Alton has done an amazing job in Burke County with that. So we wanted to highlight their experience and share that information with you guys because it's so, in education, it's really important for us to be able to learn from each other and have a platform to do that. And so Dr. Auton, she has been a classroom teacher, she's been an administrator, and now at the district level, with federal funds and also with elementary education director, she really takes care of her district. She has a passion about working with adult learners, and her ability to engage stakeholders and make everybody feel a part is really unique. Now, also, she is one of the elite who have been invited. So many of you administrators have applied to Harvard to take part in some of the educator classes. She has actually gone and attended, has a lot of background in instructional rounds, and so she's going to share with us today. So if we could flip to the agenda, I want you to know exactly what's on deck for you today. So our welcome, I'm already, 3 minutes late. I'm into her, so I'm going to get out of it. We're going to talk about the implementation model. We're going to do that short, quick commercial, and then her coaches who are all here with us today. We have Holly Thomas, Susan Smith, Lori Prevette, and Misty Acord who are going to be sharing with us their Tier 2 model of implementation. There's going to be some polls today, 2 of them, and we're going to ask you to chime in and then also put your questions. And so that we can make sure we answer those at the end. So without further ado, Dr. Alton, take it away.
Good afternoon. Like Jennifer mentioned, I am Karen Auton. I'm the Director of Elementary Schools for Burke County Public Schools. So I appreciate you allowing us some time today out of your busy day to tune in and as we kind of share with you about our experience with implementing DreamBox in Burke County. I want to say first off, we don't pretend to have all of the answers, but we can share what we found to be successful for our district, and we hope that you can take away some ideas to either begin thinking about how you want to start implementation in your district, or maybe you want to ratchet up your current implementation model. So one of our key components of successful implementation for, well, any program really, not just DreamBox, has been a clearly delineated communication plan within our district. Something that we often say in Burke County is one band, one sound. That's our goal. And for that to be possible, it has to begin with the top of the organizational structure. So without buy-in from central office to principals, teachers, and students, there's going to be holes in your traction for any program implementation. Let's see. One thing that we do use in Burke County is we want to inspect what we expect. And we can't simply rely on folks to follow through with all of our expectations all the time without us kind of holding them accountable. And for some teachers, that may be all it takes. Others, they may need some pulling, not pushing, but just some pulling and gentle tugging along. Another communication structure that we use weekly newsletters. We call them s'mores. So if you're not familiar with that term, I encourage you to Google s'more newsletters. It's just the digital format of a newsletter that we use in Burke County. Every week, our principals and our instructional coaches receive a district level s'more newsletter. And so we try to make DreamBox a focal point of that newsletter each week. And in turn, our principals send out their own s'more newsletters each week. And one thing that we encourage them to do is to have a weekly data dig and to focus on a data point every week. So for example, this past week in my weekly s'more newsletter that I send out to principals and coaches, we took a deep dive into DreamBox data and looked at our students and the growth measure. And we noticed that we had 508 students district-wide in that lowest growth tertile. Which shows that students are completing less than 2 lessons every week. And so what I did is I challenged principals to take a look and say, put names to these students. Who are these 508 students? What's their story? Why are they only completing 2 lessons a week or less? And most importantly, what are we going to do from this point forward to make sure that they grow and complete more lessons in DreamBox? And so I was pleased to see a lot of our principals took that information, put it in their own newsletters, and they're having conversations about that this week. We also make a conscious effort to include everyone in our conversations when it comes to any kind of implementation of any new program, and we've done that with DreamBox. It's important for them all to have some skin in the game. I know that doesn't sound like an earth-shattering piece of advice necessarily, but sometimes in an organization that's large, that can be more difficult than some people might realize. It's so easy to get laser focused on your job, your department, and what you need to do that sometimes we miss that bigger piece of communicating with each other. And so we really have to make a conscious effort to plan those times that we can get together and make sure that our EC folks are in the loop, that our AIG folks are in the loop, and all the other departments that go into the organization. So while we're very proud of how we approach new programs in Burke County and the way we roll out programs, specifically DreamBox, we don't want to ignore the fact that we've had bumps along the way and hurdles that we've had to jump. DreamBox is actually one of 3 new initiatives in our district this year. So you can imagine with remote learning falling in our laps, we felt a need for some strong research-based programs that were conducive to remote teaching and learning. And if you've been an educator for any amount of time, you know that we are not creatures of change. We do not like change in education. So this was a risk that we took in Burke County because we knew that this was going to be difficult for teachers to bite off 3 new programs in 1 year. And so we've had to be very strategic about finding that really tricky balance between giving them just enough information and PD to kind of keep them afloat without pushing them overboard. So again, that can be very tricky at times, but I feel like we've done a good job of maintaining that. And we do a lot of checking in with each other to make sure that we're not finding ourselves going over that ledge. And on top of it being a brand new program, we also had to problem solve around this new age of remote teaching and learning. And what we call home learning coaches, otherwise known as parents, by nature, parents want to help. And if you know about DreamBox, that initial assessment, we in most cases, we want parents to help, but in this case, we did not want parents to help. And so that was our initial little hurdle we had to jump is how are we going to get them in this program and tell parents we don't want you to help your child with this assessment. And parents have a hard time understanding that because, like I said, in most cases, we're soliciting their help and support. So that was one little hiccup of our rollout, but I feel like we jumped it successfully. We're still, now that we're back in school 4 days a week right now, I don't know where other districts are, that's smoothing out a little bit better, but we still have students in our virtual academy, so we're still having to have constant conversations about that productive struggle. Another couple of program-specific hurdles we ran into was just folks being unfamiliar with how to use DreamBox, their tools, the virtual manipulatives, and their help button, and teachers weren't super savvy with them either. So looking back, we wish we'd had some PD around some of those resources within DreamBox, and we think we could have minimized teacher frustration on some level during that time. And then lastly, DreamBox does a great job with their adaptive features for students. They're very excellent features. Our teachers like things instantaneous though, and so we've had to do a lot of preaching and helping our teachers understand that it will scaffold back down. It's just, it takes time, and it's okay for students to undergo productive struggle. What we don't want to see is the unproductive struggle. We talked about this in a meeting I had with Jennifer and our folks a week or so ago. And there's been a couple cases where we've reached out to DreamBox and they've been super helpful to help us problem solve around individual students. But those are some things that if we had known on the front end, just letting our teachers know ahead of time, like, look, it is going to adapt. It's an adaptive program, but you have to give the program time to do what it does. So let's take a deeper dive into specifics of the implementation plan. The way we rolled it out is we utilized 2 professional development sessions at each school with our DreamBox PD specialists. It gave some time, what that did is it gave teachers some time to introduce them to it. It gave them a little time to dabble in it, play around in the program, and then come back together. And at that point, that second PD session, they knew what questions to ask. Sometimes they're so overwhelmed at first, they don't know what they don't know. But once they get in there and start playing, then they have questions. And that we found that to be super beneficial to come back with that second PD as we onboarded our teachers. We also utilized Wednesdays in our district. We were very fortunate to have Wednesdays as a remote teaching and learning day, and we focused on professional development. So we were very creative. Our IC team did a great job of helping me design some PD menus for teachers every week. So we utilized the DreamBox folks, the PD support. We also did some school-based PLCs around DreamBox, taking a look at their data, and our coaches did a great job of kind of facilitating that on their campuses. And then we also did some other things, just some links for different documents, some self-paced modules, PowerPoints, video recordings, and some share sessions among teachers. So we found all those things combined to be very successful to onboard our teachers, especially that first 9 weeks where they're really digging into the program. And then continuous data exploration. We utilize grade level meetings, faculty meetings. It's so important that it's almost like a little commercial. We want to put it in front of teachers all the time so they know that this is an expectation and we want everybody to be doing it. So we utilize all of those different avenues to make sure we get that data in front of teachers. And I try to model that at the district level as well for the principals and coaches. And then in turn, they're doing that within the schools. So I want to take just a minute to hear from you all. Tell me in the chat box, if you don't mind, what are some structures you use in your district to inspect what you expect? Take another 10 seconds or so. Do we have anything in the chat box to share out?
I see checking in during PLCs.
Perfect. That's a great time, a great structure.
We also have district data dives as well as school base.
Excellent. Great. So it sounds like a lot of you are using some similar structures, and it's so important to have those structures in place rather than just trying to think of times and ways to share that information out. So we look at our implementation timeline a little bit more specifically. We started with DreamBox at one of our schools. It was actually Mountain View Elementary School, which was our lowest performing school in our district. And we started out with 3rd through 5th grade. We purchased a school license. We opened it up to all. It was not mandated at first. And our coaches worked with DreamBox to roll it out to teachers that were interested, specifically in 3rd through 5th grade. But we had an overwhelming response, and before you knew it, K2 teachers were feeling left out. They wanted in on DreamBox. What is this I'm hearing about? And so we slowly trickled it out to kindergarten through 2nd grade at Mountain View Elementary School. And in our district, we're a mid-size rural school district, and so our teachers talk to each other. So Mountain View teachers are talking to Valdez teachers, and Valdez teachers are talking to teachers at other schools within our district. And so before you knew it, there was this DreamBox buzz in the county, which is what we wanted to happen. We wanted it to spread. And so that gave us a leverage point for late spring 2020, when we had gone into emergency plan C, teaching and learning here in North Carolina. And we started gently introducing DreamBox to, first of all, our principals and our coaches, because we feel very passionate that our leaders in our district need to have the language and the knowledge for any kind of implementation. They need to know because they're going to be the ones answering the questions. So we started off with them first, and then we trickled down to our teachers, and we offered a self-paced module for them to kind of start dabbling. And then students and teachers were encouraged to dabble and explore in DreamBox in the spring. And then that gave us time over the summer to prepare for our fall implementation, which we implemented in kindergarten through 5th grade for all 14 of our elementary schools. Once it was off the ground, our math coaches began exploring how we could utilize DreamBox in our MTSS standard treatment protocol tool, and they're going to share more about that with you later on. And then in the winter, that's when we rolled out the MTSS framework, and we've embedded DreamBox into that framework and those standard treatment protocols. And here we are in the spring, almost 1 year later from our full implementation. And again, I don't pretend to have all the answers, but we are still learning and growing and trying to make DreamBox a great experience for all of our students and teachers in Burke County. So I'm going to pause right there and turn it over to Jennifer once again.
Fantastic, thank you. So I wanted to make this quick short commercial because some on this workshop webinar, they know what DreamBox is and some do not. So I thought you would rather hear from someone who's in the trenches, Dr. Jamie Fry, who is very well known. He's an aspiring superintendent. He's known for his work with North Carolina Department of Public Instruction and also with the Friday Institute. So Dr. Auton, if you would press that.
At Claremont Elementary School in Catawba County Schools in North Carolina. My school chose DreamBox initially because we were looking for a math solution that would cater to the conceptual needs of all the students in our school. We had a team of teachers that we empowered to sit and listen to presentations from different programs, and DreamBox jumped out for a lot of reasons. All of the work that our students do in DreamBox is conceptually based. It's not just a rote worksheet. It's a process that they go through where they're learning, moving from that concrete to the representational, then to be ready for that abstract. What we know about teaching math is that works, and that's what's helped our students grow the most. It also gave us really rich data to be able to dig in and learn more about our kids, and not just how they perform on a test, but really how they think and the strategies that they're using to solve problems, mathematically speaking. So the amount of of worth that is in the program that we purchased through DreamBox is just insurmountable, and it has helped us so much not only be able to do the obvious things, which is raise test scores and increase achievement, but it's helped us to be able to know our kids and know the learners that are sitting in the seats in our classroom, so that when it does come time for us to facilitate small groups or whatever we're trying to do with our kids, we know how to group most effectively. In this time of remote learning, it's really given us the opportunity to just reach out and extend our reach with our kids, because it was a platform that we were using prior to the onset of COVID-19. And in that process, we really gained the opportunity to be able to extend that even when we weren't around to show them how to use the program. So we were blessed because we did come about earlier, and now it's paying dividends. So we can see how our students are thinking through math. We can ensure that they continue to make progress despite these circumstances. And we can do everything we can to ensure that our students continue to be successful, whether or not we can be here, there, or anywhere with them. So I could not say enough positive things about DreamBox. We will absolutely be continuing to use it because it's a tried and true proven solution. It's aligned to our state's standard course of study, and it has made a difference in the lives of our students and in our school's achievement.
Thank you so much. And so I just wanted to point out really quick, with a lot of learning.
My name is Brian. I am currently the sitting principal at Claremont Elementary School in Catawba County School.
With a lot of learning recovery taking place, educators really need something that's quick. It's just like Netflix. When you get on the Netflix, you don't have to take a test to figure out how to use it. You just get on and start using it, and Netflix learns you and learns your preferences. The same thing happens in DreamBox. We're great for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. We cover all state standards in every state. We're individualized versus personalized. You can personalize to a group, or you can individualize to an individual student. And that's where our jam is. That's where we're really focused. And we're different than other solutions. We're not just another digitized worksheet. We're not multiple choice. We're not stagnant data that you took at BOI and you don't touch again until MOI. We're really real-time data that pivots and turns in real time, and we actually capture student thinking. So we're really different. We're not that sit and get, we're that think and do. That's it for the commercial, no more. Thank you for your time, and I will hand it back over to Burke County and their coaches to talk specifically about MTSS. Thank you.
Okay, first off, we have a short poll. We are curious, has your district incorporated DreamBox into your standard treatment protocol? Give you guys about 5 more seconds to answer that. Okay. In North Carolina, we have a statewide multi-tiered system of support. In order to meet the needs of this state-required framework, we realized that one single program wouldn't be able to meet the needs of all the different components of this framework. So first, we took an inventory of all the programs that we currently used, and we narrowed it down to determine which ones were best suited for our district. So in addition to that, we also interviewed several districts in North Carolina to learn more about the programs that they were using and how they were implementing the programs that they used. And then we took the inventory and the interviews with the other districts, and then we decided on the programs that we were going to use. So we decided to, as our universal screener, we have Renaissance. And so we specifically use the STAR screening report in Renaissance as our universal screener to get the students that are struggling. And then we also use Renaissance as our diagnostic component. And so we specifically use the STAR instructional planning report. And then we also use the standards report that's found in DreamBox. in order to get the diagnostic component. And then next, for the intervention piece, we use DreamBox long-term assignments. And then we supplement DreamBox with direct explicit instruction. And then we focus on specific standards that the students are needing. And then finally, for progress monitoring, we use the DreamBox long-term assignments. And within the long-term assignments, we use the proficiency scores, and teachers record those scores each month. And then we also give STAR monthly test and Renaissance. And then we used all of the programs that we chose, and we used these programs to create our standard treatment protocol. So the math instructional coach team, we met and we built the framework for the standard treatment protocol. And then we presented this protocol to a group, and that included school psychologists, specialists, and principals in the district. And then based on their feedback and their thoughts and suggestions, we made minor adjustments and then final revisions to this protocol.
Okay. And once the team finished the standard treatment protocol, they were able to share it with our elementary schools. The instructional coaches made videos to train our school staff and the MTSS committees on each step of the protocol. They explained the timelines, paperwork, and what it should look like in the classrooms. And then each individual school's MTSS committee watched the videos and were able to discuss it and come up with questions and concerns. These questions were then shared on a Google document, and the IC team reviewed the questions, and a few days later, both county and school level teams met to follow up and clarify the process. Now it was the school's MTSS team's turn to deliver the standard treatment protocol to staff. At this time, I was not an instructional coach, but I was on my school's MTSS committee, and we presented the MAP protocol on a professional development day. As a team, we started off with the explanation of the protocol. We discussed what we would use as our screener, the diagnostic piece, types of interventions, and the progress monitoring aspect, which integrates DreamBox. And after our training, teachers were then able to start implementing these changes to their classroom.
So as you can see, we decided to use DreamBox for everyone in the district. So that's what we considered Tier 1. But in looking at the Tier 2 plan that we devised, we kind of started with the end in mind, and we knew that our students that were flagging out in our screeners, the students that needed supplemental instruction, we knew we wanted them to grow at a rate faster than just the expected rate because they are getting supplemental instruction. Our Tier 3 students are getting intensive instruction interventions, so we wanted them to grow at a faster rate. In our state, of course, we have our list of state standards, but we also have a document that we're working off that has identified the most foundational skills in each grade level. And you'll see on this slide here, we're referring to them as focus skills. But every grade level in our state has about 15 or 20 focus skills that we have, received. And so on average, each grade level has about 18 of those. And so if you think about the expected growth rate for a student that would be at Tier 1, we would hope they would become proficient in those 18 focus skills in each year. An ambitious growth rate for our Tier 2 students and Tier 3 students, we're hoping they're going to grow faster. So we're hoping, that they would grow about 1.5 times the expected growth rate. So they're expected to become, or we're hoping they'll become proficient in those 18 skills plus an additional 9 skills. And that would help, we're hoping to close that gap faster. So, I guess if you're thinking about a student that's about a year behind, we're hoping that we would be able to close that gap within a 2-year period. So how are we using DreamBox to do that? Burke County has decided our intervention plan has 2 parts. One part is, or half of it, is direct explicit instruction with the student and the teacher working with manipulatives, going through the CRA. And then the other half of that intervention piece is the DreamBox. And so we've chosen to use the DreamBox long-term assignments to help fulfill our Tier 2 interventions. And Susan's going to talk more about this in just a second, but we decided to use those long-term assignments in 4-week cycles. One thing, we know that our MTSS teams meet once every 4 weeks, but our hope is that these students that are receiving supplemental instruction, so these students are doing their regular adaptive work in DreamBox, but they're also getting the supplemental through the long-term assignments. So our hope is that they can become proficient in one of those focus skills every 4 weeks. And we have 9 of those 4-week periods. So that would equate to 9 skills being mastered in a year's time, which would be about 1.5 times the expected growth rate. So I wanted just to kind of explain how we came up with that 4-week cycle. And one thing we know our teachers want is they want a black and white plan for what intervention should look like as far as time and frequency. And so we've been in 3 different situations this year, as Dr. Auton mentioned. We've been fully remote, we've been hybrid, we've been face-to-face. So we developed an expectation for the intervention frequency and duration. Dr. Alton, do you mind to click on that link that says Plan ABC? This is just kind of an ugly version of it, but basically our Tier 2 students, when we're on Plan A at school each day, the teacher, will be providing that 3 times a week with 25-minute sessions. That 25-minute session, again, is combined, the direct explicit instruction plus the use of the DreamBox long-term assignments. In Plan B, it looks a little different, 2 times a week doing those long-term assignments and conferencing, and then 1 time a week at home. We feel strongly that we want the students to do that DreamBox long-term assignments at school, where we know that they're not getting that assistance from parents at home. So we've, adjusted that. When they're at home there, they'll be working on adaptive, but with us in the building, we want them working on those long-term assignments. And then of course, Plan C, when they're home all the time, it does look different. And you'll see beside that, our students that are at Tier 3, they get more intensive intervention. So basically, we have increased the frequency and we've increased the duration. So instead of 3 times a week, it's 4. Instead of 25-minute sessions, it's 30-minute sessions. So we just kind of wanted to show you our thinking behind why we chose 4-week cycles, long-term assignments. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then just to give a little more specific information about how we use DreamBox data for our Tier 2 plan and our Tier 3 students. Like Misty and Holly have said, our MTSS teams meet monthly, so every 4 weeks, to discuss the data and discuss student progress. And we ask that teachers record the weekly proficiency score for the long-term assignments for their MTSS paperwork, along with completing a monthly STAR math assessment, which they record that score as well. So our goal over the 4-week period is that we would prefer for students to show 100% proficiency with that standard that they've worked on for their long-term assignment. However, it doesn't always work out nice and neat with finishing the long-term assignment exactly in 4 weeks. So we are flexible with our plan. So if students meet that 100% proficiency before the 4 weeks is over, then the teacher can assign another long-term assignment and focus on another standard within that same domain. If students do not reach 100% completion of the long-term assignment and have that 100% proficiency at the end of the 4 weeks, then the MTSS team can meet and decide what those next steps are. So if the child has got 80 to 85% proficiency, then that MTSS team is probably going to recommend that they move on to another standard for their next long-term assignment. If they have below the 80 or 85%, then there's going to be a discussion. Do we need to continue and do another 4-week cycle or 4-week assignment with this same standard so that they can reach that, at least that 80 to 85% proficiency? Or, is the student struggling? Do we need to look at assigning a different standard for the long-term assignment? Maybe do we need to find a related standard in the grade level below? Those sorts of things. So that MTSS team, they discuss and they decide what those next steps are going to be for the student and for the long-term assignment.
Can I
So
just,
Dr. Auton, go ahead.
if you have questions, we do have a question chat box. You can pose those in there, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions at the end. So feel free to go ahead and type those in there.
Thank you. Okay, and if you'll go ahead and move on to the next slide, Dr. Auton. Thank you. So this gives just a screenshot of what the graph looks like that accompanies the long-term assignment. So our teachers use that proficiency score that's circled in red. That's what they record weekly for us and for their MTSS team to analyze. But again, at the bottom of this graph, it shows for each week the proficiency gained, okay, or the completion rate, completion percentage for each week. And then this is not in the screenshot, but below this graph, it will give you the activity details of what the student's been working on, and those direct links to those lessons that the teacher can play. Those are there as well on this report. So if you have a student that's struggling, you can click on that lesson and kind of go through it with the student and make sure that it's not the skill that the student's struggling with. You can kind of make sure that they understand like the directions for the assignment or the activity, and make sure that there's not confusion there. So it's helpful that that's all in that same report. And then on the next slide, we have just an example of our STAR report that we use, just so that you can see that as well. Again, we take that monthly STAR math assessment, and this is the progress monitoring report that you see here. And it shows that trend line, but it also shows their growth rate. And so we use that when we're trying to decide with our comparison model that we use in Burke County, looking at each student's growth rate, comparing it to the other students in the intervention group, to see, is the intervention being successful? Are all the students growing? Is there one student that's flagging out that's not growing? That sort of thing. So again, that's just an example of our STAR monthly report that we use in conjunction with that DreamBox data.
Here is one thing I didn't mention, if you don't mind. Back when we were talking about the use of the DreamBox as the intervention, that's the long-term assignments, of course, is half of that. And then we talked about the direct explicit instruction. One thing we wanted to make sure is that we communicate is that the direct explicit instruction that the teacher is providing is very skill specific. It's targeted toward that same North Carolina standard that we're also attacking with the DreamBox. So both of those are always aligning. And so, as Susan mentioned, we're if we see that the intervention is not being successful and we need to change that, we just make sure we also adjust that direct instruction or that conferencing with the teacher.
Thank you, Misty. And we are happy to entertain questions now. So feel free to use the chat feature of the webinar. And I think that Jennifer and Andy that are on the call will help us monitor those, and we'll be happy to answer them.
Sure. So I'm going to ask if you will go ahead and progress the slide, just so there's that QR code for those who haven't used DreamBox before, they want to learn more about it. But I'm going to have Andy come on. Andy is one of our client experience managers. We really assign people to take care of your district. You have a whole team looking out for you. Andy's going to present some of those questions now, and feel free to reach out in the chat box if you have other questions.
Right. Can everybody hear me all right? Perfect. All right, so there was a question that just came in that I was able to half answer, but I think the rest of it should come from the Burke County team. So I want to say that one. It says for long-term assignments, do you assign at grade level or assign a lower vertically aligned standard? And then I also asked, how are those decisions made? And then the part that I was able to answer for this, it says, my understanding is that assigned focus does not adapt. So, and what I was able to answer on that is assignments can only adapt within the parameters that you set. So if you set a 3rd grade assignment, DreamBox can only assign within 3rd grade in the domain or the standard or the cluster that you assign. So if a student does need 2nd grade level or anything lower than that within the assignment itself, it can't adapt down, or it won't adapt down to that. Outside of assignments, DreamBox adapts to any level, no matter what. So that's why I wanted to give that little bit of context. But as far as the question, again, I wanted to let the Burke County team answer. For long-term assignments, do you assign at grade level or assign lower vertically aligned standard? And how do you make those decisions?
Thank you. Misty or Susan, would you like to take that one?
I'm happy to. We do not always necessarily assign long-term assignments that are on grade level. For the purposes of what we're talking about here with our tier 2 students, most of the time they have flagged, they've screened. And for the diagnostic piece, we do use DreamBox to help us determine that targeted skill alongside the universal screener information that we use. But for example, you may have a 4th grader who on their student overview, they have not proven proficiency in a 1st grade standard. At the school I'm at this morning, we have a 4th grader who is she's completing long-term assignments in 1st grade numbers and base 10. She's still not proficient within 0 to 20. And so we are assigning 1st grade NBT standards for her so that we can fill those gaps. So teachers that choose to use assignments that are on grade level that are aligning with what they teach, they tend to use short-term assignments. But for the purposes of MTSS and using this as a very skill specific, we are assigning them to the grade level in which where we see the gaps.
And can I add to that? We use our STAR diagnostic report and the STAR individual student report to also give us information about those standards that the students are struggling with. And so when we look at that, it tells us kind of what grade level to start looking at. So for Misty's 4th grader that she mentioned, the STAR report told us that the child was working on a 1st grade level. So that's how we start digging in and figuring out not only which standard to focus on, which grade level to focus on, that sort of thing. So hopefully you have a screener or a diagnostic report that could help you in your county determine where those students need to be working as well. One thing that we did run into is that, especially with our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, sometimes teachers would give a long-term assignment on a standard that was below their grade level, and it would say that the student already was 100% proficient with that standard. And what we learned from some of our trainings with Lori Carson is that that the student can still be given the long-term assignment, even if they're showing 100% proficiency. And what happens is DreamBox will give them a review lesson. And if they struggle with that review lesson, then it will adapt and move back for where the child is. If they're successful with that review lesson, then they keep that 100% proficiency. But she really helped us out with that piece of the assignments.
Right. So the next question we have is, do all of your classroom teachers record this proficiency score, or is it just the interventionists working with tier 2 and tier 3 students? And I believe that's specifically talking about proficiency scores that you get out of the long-term assignments.
So
go ahead.
Our classroom teachers are the ones that record that proficiency score each week. We do not have math interventionist or math specialist at this time in our elementary schools, and so it is the classroom teacher that keeps track of that Tier 2 data for our students.
Anything to add, Misty?
No.
Okay, just making sure. All right, so the next one is, so looking at the 15 to 20 focus skills, what universal screening did you use to identify student proficiency in each of the skills? Are these skills addressed according to the pacing, i.e. when the skills are taught in the year, or are these foundation skills taught after Tier 3 regardless of what is being taught in math workshop? And that was a long one. I can repeat it again if you guys want me to.
Okay, repeat it one more time just so I can make sure.
Okay. So it says, so looking at the 15 to 20 focus skills, what universal screening did you use to identify student proficiency in each of the skills? And are these skills addressed according to the pacing, i.e. when the skills are taught in the year, or are these foundational skills taught as Tier 3 regardless of what is being taught in math workshop?
The universal screening tool that we used in our county is through Renaissance. It's the STAR Math. We use that to help us identify those foundational skills. And honestly, that's where those focus skill documents came from. We have lots of standards at every grade level, but again, these focus skills are the most foundational ones that every student needs. So our district does have a pacing that throughout the year addresses each of those, and our teachers are expected to follow that pacing with their whole group on grade level instruction. Obviously, when students are at the Tier 2 and Tier 3 level, they are not necessarily working on grade level. We have guided math. Our schedule, our teachers are expected to have a certain amount of time blocked in their calendar each day for guided math, where we are meeting the students' needs on their level. So during that time, that's when they'll find themselves maybe going down below below their grade level. So you've got a third grade teacher that may be teaching some first grade standards. So that teacher is actually having to learn those first grade standards. And that is a challenge that we have come across. We probably could have mentioned that earlier. Teachers are very familiar with their grade level and their standards and not as familiar with lower grades. So that is a challenge, and that's something we're working on together as an instructional team, is to try to help provide that PD for them.
Okay. Lori answered one of the other ones, but I think the last one that I see in here, and if Burke County team can't answer this, is something we can step in and try to answer to the best of our ability as well. But how similar is DreamBox to Redbird or Alex? Do they compare? I just didn't know, did you guys have experience with either one of those? Okay. My experience with those are a little bit lacking, but Lori, I didn't know if you had to put you on the spot real quick, if you had any experience with those. And I haven't seen somebody compare us to Alex or Redbird for a while. I do know that DreamBox as a whole is really focused on adapting to students as an individual with a really big focus on conceptual understanding and not just practice of math. Students really have to show why they got the answer correct or incorrect, as opposed to most of the programs that just say, you got that one wrong, let's give you an easier problem. They don't necessarily diagnose why the student got that answer wrong. But that's one of the main differences, I would say, just between DreamBox and most other programs in general. But again, Lori or Jennifer, you guys have any other input? I'd love to hear that.
I don't have any experience with Redbird or Alex, so I wouldn't be able to answer that. I can dig around to see if I can find something, but I don't have experience with either of those programs.
I would say you absolutely nailed it, Andy. We're absolutely so far away from anybody else in the market. We've been in personalized learning for 10 plus years, and it's just night and day the way we take the data and what we do with it. Capturing thinking versus looking at right wrong answers is a game changer, because the way we look at it is within a correct answer, you can still have a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 student. So you're losing an opportunity to assist students who are correct in the answer too. So we want to make sure we're taking every moment, every opportunity to progress students based on how they got their answer. Because after all, that lower level of I do, you do, we do, that's great at a lower level initially, but over the long period of time, you've really got to move students conceptually, especially if we're going to create the students who are competitive in our new digital era. So that's a great question. So glad you asked it. Feel free to reach out if you have more questions around that.
That's all that's in the questions chat, excuse me, that I can see right now. Anybody has any other ones? Feel free to put them in there. Oh, another one just came in. It says, I apologize if I missed this, but are there lessons, videos, examples to help them when they are struggling, or does it prompt them to just keep trying with hints? I'll let Burke County team explain their experience. I think this is a better question answered from educators who have actually used the program. So yeah, feel free to take it.
I can, in the DreamBox long-term assignment, as the students working through that, it shows, and Susan had shown a slide, the graph. Below the graph is a link to every lesson that the child has tried. So if a child is not successful on a lesson, the teacher can go in and play a sample lesson for that child and pull that either the group back or the individual child back that struggled, and play that lesson beside them and work through it with them, and kind of find where they struggled with that lesson. And then when the child goes back to their seat, they're going to get a similar lesson with different numbers and different problems. And so they can go on to the next lesson and try it again. So it does give a lesson for each different lesson the child is working on the long-term assignment.
We do have hints. We have a help and a hint button within the lesson that students can hit at any time. It will give them instruction or a little bit of guidance. At the same time, it's not going to give them the answer. That's part of the reason, or part of the reason for that is we really want to see what students can do with what they're given. We want to see what strategies they come up with. We want to see their thought processes, and even if they can get to the answer, maybe outside of DreamBox, showing how they get to an answer, showing how they're struggling specifically within DreamBox really gives the program a great idea of what foundational gaps there might be, where the student is excelling in other areas, and how to best give that student the next step. So we do give help and hints, but we typically don't give answers or anything like that. If a student is struggling a whole lot within an answer, DreamBox does stop the lesson a little early too. We don't want students to get burnt out. We don't want students to be so frustrated with math that they're not interested in playing. So if a student is struggling, we will notice that pretty quickly and take action immediately.
I just wanted to say again, thank you for all the fantastic questions. Thank you for taking valuable time, probably eating today, to spend time with us. I wanted to thank our wonderful panel and Burke County Schools, Dr. Alton. We really appreciate you bringing, kind of pulling back the curtains and letting us see what you do on the inside in your district. It's much appreciated. Thank you guys for your time. And we're going to let you go a little early. Have a fantastic day. Thank you. And don't forget, check out if you have any questions. We'll be sending you the PowerPoint later and a copy of this webinar for you to reference. Have a fantastic day.